today to learn how to prune trees, and where our focus is on fruit trees. What are some of the reasons that we want to learn about pruning? Okay, number one is when you plant a new tree, there's a certain thing that you should do to get the form of that tree set from the beginning. And then you just, in about 4 years, you do a little bit each year so that as a tree grows larger, it will have a good form. The branches will be well spaced, and you will have a more productive tree. Most people plant a brand new tree and then they don't do anything whatsoever. And they turn their back on it, and then 3 or 4 years later, the tree is overgrown, has lots of problems in it. What you want to happen is it has a good form with good space between the branches for good air circulation, but also for light to come in. This is more important in fruit trees, of course, than shade trees. So let's just, whatever I talk about today, we are referring to fruit trees, all right? So why do we prune? We prune, most people prune first for size. Now, there are monstrous trees like that big avocado, and this is very typical in Los Angeles yards. You don't prune it. You can't do it. You don't have the ability, you don't have the tools. You're going to need to pay somebody. So what I'm focusing today is what do you do when you plant the tree so you don't get there, all right? The second reason, so pruning for size. Pruning for production is another reason, and it's more important to us with fruit trees. So you want to encourage more light to come in. The fruit tree needs light for the flowers, because the flowers become the fruit. And so if you have a fruit tree that's packed tightly close together, there's not going to be sunlight getting through to all the branches. The other thing that you want to prune for more spacing, good spacing for fruit trees, is you don't want the branches, especially the young branches, to get too heavy, look, because they will often break when they're young branches. So you want to prune, again, for good spacing and keeping those things in mind. So I've given you some examples here. This is kind of the typical tree that people start on. It's going to have lots of branches going out this way, and it's going to have some little secondary or tertiary branches coming out. So what many people do is they get some tools and they just cut. So if the tree is this big and they want it to be this big, they just cut it off. It's like amputation. Right. So this is what they do. And that's too tall. Cut it off. All right. And a lot of people do that. Oh, that tree's getting too tall. Let me just cut the top off. On the branch of any plant, in fact, flowering plant, vegetable plant, any plant. On those branches are little new growing areas that are called nodes, N-O-D-E-S. And those are little areas of any plant where it is capable of producing new tissue. So sometimes a node is for making new leaves, making new branches. Sometimes the node is to make new flowers, but it's an area for new growth. And it's a wonderful ability that plants have to do that, because just imagine if you were in an accident and you cut off your arm. All right, what are you going to have to do? You're just going to have an amputated arm, right? But plants can grow out another one. And so that's the wonderful thing about plants. If, though, you just chop off all the extra stuff that you don't want. Because of those nodes, the plant is going to respond with new growth, new growth, new growth, new growth, new growth all over the plant, and then you'll end up with a tree that's more crowded, less space for air and less space for light. And so your tree should look like this. So it's well spaced between the branches. There aren't too many little twiggy things. You look at the whole tree and you look at where it's crowded, you look at the height, and then you think about it as you prune. All right. Now I'm going to go back to the form of a tree. This is the main stem, and that's often called a central leader. Most trees, most plants are going to have a central leader. Sometimes because of an accident in the tree, or because sometimes you cut it, maybe over here somewhere, and this got cut off. So then what happened was the tree got split into one main branch there, now the main branch there. And you don't want that. So you want to try to have a central leader. You are going to have some side branches from there. So here's your central leader. Now, with fruit trees, there is and for home orchards, for home gardens, there is another way to prune fruit trees, and it's called open center, or it's called a base shape or a funnel shape. So in those cases, you would carefully prune some of this inside branches and encourage one of these side branches, to grow out. One coming this way too, so it's not just two-dimensional. And then the center of the plant gets more sunlight, so the branches that are in the center, the branches are going this way and this way, those will also get enough sunlight to make fruit. So imagine like a funnel in that shape. And so some people like to do their fruit trees that way, and other people want a more, traditional form where there's a main stem, and the other branches are preserved. So look at the distance between these branches. You don't want it overcrowded. And this gets us to when you have a brand new plant, and Stephen's going to get some for the garden. It comes in a can, and you're going to plant it. All right. When it comes in a can, it has no leaves on it. It just looks like a stick. Yeah?
Yeah.
And sometimes, the stick is this tall, sometimes a little taller, depending on how long the nursery had the plant in their place. And maybe they didn't sell it for 5 years, so it got really tall. Don't necessarily think, oh, this is a taller tree, so it's a better tree for me to buy, because that isn't necessarily true. But if you do get one that has a long stem, you are going to have to train it. So you don't want to, after you plant it, you don't want to leave it like this, because you want to encourage, remember I said, when you cut, you encourage new growth. So you take a tall thing like this, and when you reduce the height in the right way, you're going to get more new branches coming out, which are going to give you fruit. When you buy a new fruit tree in a can, you cut it down so it's 3.5 to 4 feet tall. All right? And why do you do that? You want to promote new growth, but you want to direct the new growth. The important thing is when you look down on the tree from the top, what you want to see is kind of more evenly spaced branches going to the side. That's called the scaffold, or lateral. So they're side-growing branches rather than the vertical ones. So when you look down on that tree, you would like to have more or less evenly spaced laterals. So 1, 2, maybe 3, like that. And as the tree grows up, the next year you're going to prune again, so that higher up on here you have another scaffold. Okay? So if you see the tree has too many branches on one side and not on this side, then that's where you can do some pruning to correct that. And not to have something that's really too tight and close, you know. Those are too tight and close. You should try to have, between the scaffolds, you should have at least about a foot, 6 inches to a foot. If you leave 6 inches, it's not a mistake, because the next year you might just take that off, all right, and go, oh, that's a little crowded. I want to have a foot in between, not 6 inches. So you can always adjust, but you have to do this when the tree is small. The other thing, the point I want to make is, where do you cut? Where do you cut? Okay. Most trees, especially that have a branch of a good size, even this size, have where the branch comes out, the trunk, has a thickness around the base of it. It's called a branch collar. It's a collar. And that protects, it helps, it strengthens the branch so it doesn't fall off easily. And when you prune that branch off, you don't want to cut into the branch collar. So here's the branch collar. See how it's kind of fat like that? So when you make your cut, you do it on the outside, of the branch collar. All right? This one here, here's where the cut was made, right along the line of the stem. So this branch collar was not kept, and it got pruned away. The problem with that is then you have this open wound right here, where you cut the branch off. It becomes an open wound, and the branch collar helps to heal. It makes new tissue. It covers that cut. So if you cut the branch collar off, you don't have that protective tissue. And so then you have a wound, which some people put tar or paint or something on it. Don't do that. Don't do that. Don't cover a wound. Make a good cut so you don't feel like you have to cover the wound. If you put tar on a tree wound, it will not be 100% tight. There's going to be a little hole, or there'll be a crack or something in that cover, that Band-Aid that you put on it. And bacteria and fungi can get in that crack, and then it will be inside your bandage, and so the plant will have a problem in that area. If you leave it open, you know, eventually the air will dry it, and the plant will make its own bandage. All right. So this problem here is the branch was cut off, and the person took it off too far from the branch collar. Here's the branch collar. And so this is what we call a stub. It's something that sticks out. And our teacher, Yvonne Savio, I always remember her saying, no stubs long enough to hang a hat on. So you want to make it close, you know, to the branch collar, not sticking out.